Jesus was talking to the crowds one day. He said, "I've got a story that'll blow you away. I know you're discouraged. I can see you're dismayed. But take heart and take courage and keep trying to pray." He said, "In a certain city was this certain judge. When people came to him for justice, he did not give a fudge. He didn't respect people, and he didn't care for God. He had the moral conscience of a cephalopod. And then there was this widow who came day and night saying, 'Grant me some justice. Just try and do what's right. You know, my opponent is doing me wrong.' That's why I keep on coming, singing the same song." Now, a widow at that time didn't have many rights. She had no one to help her or to take up her fights. No possessions, no standing in a court of law. Getting help from a judge was the only hope she saw. Finally, our judge stopped and said to himself, "If I keep sticking this case on the back of the shelf, just ignoring her pleas and ignoring her shouts, this widow won't stop. She'll keep wearing me out. So I will grant her justice, just to keep her away. Then I'll have some peace and quiet to enjoy my day. Though I don't care about God or the citizenry, and I look at my job hypocritically." Jesus said, "Are you hearing what this slimy judge said? But we have a judge of love and justice instead. Will God fail to grant justice? Will God fail to give help? God will hear every cry, every yammer and yelp." So, strange as it seems, I'm tempted to think, though it's hard to perceive with our nation on the brink, sometimes hard to believe when our spirits sink. But I invite you to receive this word, I believe. That God knows every plea of a nation in need. God loves every person, any color or creed. Every widow and orphan, however little they possess. Every person who's stressed. Every immigrant oppressed. Every trans kid in distress. Every life that's a mess. Every justice repressed. Every need for redress. And every desperate request. So, let's ask for God's help. Give a cry, give a yell, and knock on God's door who wishes us well. On the door of our God who just wishes us well. Not long ago, I was walking, that's the end of the poem, in case you were worried. Not long ago, I was walking across Broadway and I slipped on something and I landed splat in the middle of the street. My first thought was not, I wonder if I broke something. And my first thought was not, I hope I don't get crushed by that truck that's coming my way. That would have made sense. My first thought was, I hope no one saw me fall and starts coming and asks me if I need help, because that would be so embarrassing. Truth is, I hate asking for help. That is definitely a character flaw. I think it's tied up with the illusion that I should be able to figure things out on my own, that I don't want to feel dependent on anybody else, and also that I don't want to risk asking for something and getting turned down. I want you to know that I am not proud of all of that. That seems like the kind of weakness that pretends to be strength. Because the truth is, we all need help. Lots of help, all the time, every single day. We all need help. I know I need help, and I hate asking for help. Strange, then, that over the past few years, I have found that I really enjoy asking for money. Not for myself, but for things I believe in and things I'm excited about. And so, as you may know, Over the past months, with help from Ken and Lee and Andrea and AJ and Amy and Cynthia and many others, I've had the privilege of speaking with a lot of you about our efforts to keep a roof over our heads. These conversations have been very moving to me. And it's not, I think, because everybody's so excited about clay red Spanish roof tiles. And I don't believe it's because anybody has a lifelong interest in the obscure architectural style known as scientific eclecticism. Thank you. Oh, you gotta love it. Who made that up? No, these conversations always turn quickly to why the building matters. Why it matters to those of us who gather for worship. Why this building matters to our food insecure neighbors who come here for emergency food. Why it matters to our newest neighbors who have come to see this place as a rare space of safety and caring, for a shelter from the anti-immigrant rhetoric and actions that swirl around their lives in other spaces and places. Why the building matters for thousands of people who come here for free Carnegie Hall concerts, or last night's Queer Urban Orchestra concert, or amazing theater events. And I love having those conversations. I'll be glad to have some more. Anybody? And I love the way these conversations are not just about money. Not everybody has money, and few of us have extra money. But I know from my own experience with giving that being able to contribute something, my time, my talents, my treasure, something to make something happen that I believe in, giving something that helps increase the amount of love and justice is a blessing that blesses in both directions. Yesterday, a bunch of us traveled to Times Square along with thousands of our closest friends and other people and frogs to knock loudly and persistently on the door of an unjust system and those who perpetuate it. As usual, David Wildman said it best when he told a reporter, "At every turn, this administration is going against the gospel of Jesus Christ." We gather here because these policies are really an affront to the gospel. Which brings us back, believe it or not, to the parable of the persistent widow and the unjust judge, that story that Melanie read for us. It is a story that's relevant to us in our country at this moment when many of us feel that we have to count on the courts, have to count on just judges to help us hang on to justice and fairness in our public life at a time when, sadly, capriciousness and vindictiveness are dominant themes. But more than that, it's a story that seems to have something to teach me personally. Maybe two things. First, it's okay, Kay, to ask for help. Asking for help can be a sacred act. And also, it's okay to be impatient with the way things are. Here's the truth I'd like you to know about impatience. We know that patience is a virtue, and yet there are things that we cannot and should not be patient about. I don't want to be patient as people who are economically poor are blamed for their poverty, and I don't want to be patient as healthcare is treated as a political pawn instead of a matter of life and death, which it is. I don't want to be patient as trans folks are targeted for political advantage. I do not want to be patient about those things. And I don't want to be patient as people whose crime is believing in our country as a place of safety and opportunity are cynically demonized. I don't need to be patient as black and brown people are targeted by ICE, as little kids are arrested, as a pastor is pepper sprayed while praying. I don't need to be patient. And neither do you. Here's what I think. God can deal with our impatience, our holy impatience in the face of injustice. God can deal with that. But may God forgive us for our infernal patience, putting up with things the way they are. I want personally to be more like that widow, that impatient widow, that insistent and persistent widow of Luke chapter 18, who knows what's right and isn't afraid to demand it, who knows what's right, who knows what she needs, and she isn't afraid to ask. I want to be more like that. The Bible mentions widows a lot, as you might have noticed. 80 or 81 times in the Bible, if you count. Not that I personally did the counting. Mostly widows are referred to in a passive sense, noted for their vulnerability, their poverty, and their powerlessness. But that wasn't true of the widow who encounters the prophet Elisha, who Pastor Lee spoke to us about last Sunday, who ends up finding the courage to go from house to house asking for help, getting over her embarrassment at her need for help, and just ask. Just ask. And that is certainly not true of the widow in today's story, who was not afraid to ask for what she needs, to ask for what she knows is right. These two women are strong and forthright and empowered. They are the badass widows of the Bible. Here's what Jesus wants us to get from this parable. And he says it right up front. Don't lose heart. Jesus told them a story so they wouldn't lose heart. Jesus wants them to not give up. Because as Martin Luther King used to insist, drawing on the words of the abolitionist Reverend Theodore Parker, when our days become dreary, with low hovering clouds of despair, and when our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, let us remember that there is a creative force in this universe working to pull down the gigantic mountains of evil. There is a power that is able to make a way out of no way and to transform dark yesterdays into bright tomorrows. Let us realize, he said, let us realize that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. So don't lose heart. Don't give up. Always remember that plea of Jesus. God will come alongside us to make a way. So pursue what's right with a holy impatience. Ask for the help we need and respond to others' cries for help. I've been thinking about money. I've been thinking about the way we think about money in our time and place. A time when we are taught to crave accumulation and idolize billionaires. Even when we understand what it takes to make that kind of money requires exploiting other people. St. Augustine, that 5th century saint, has a different take on money. Augustine tells us, find out how much God has given to you, and from it, take what you need. The remainder is needed by others. Life is not about grasping, it's about giving. Giving is a spiritual act, and it's not about the amount. It's about the intention. It's about the dedication. It's about a commitment to a life of abundance for everybody. Tithing and giving are about understanding that everything we have comes from God, and it all belongs to God, and it all returns to God in one way or another. And God can use us, all of us, and every part of us, to make a way where it seems like there's no way. Most of all, Giving is about a hope and a faith in the future that refuses to accept that the way things are is the way they're always going to be. A persistent faith that refuses to believe that injustice has the last word and that death is the end of life. So, over the next few weeks, when it seems like we around here are like that annoyingly persistent widow as we keep wearing out your patience with our Love in Action stewardship campaign, please try and remember what it's really all about, what the campaign is really about. It's about dreaming a church that's not comfortable with a world or a nation that thrives on injustice. It's about a church that tries to live up to the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's about a church becoming and being a church that knows that however things look in your life, or however things look in our country, God is going to make a way, because that is who God is. That is what God does, and God is going to make a way. So I invite you to stand and let's sing about that reality of who God is and what God is, because soon and very soon, God is going to make a way. It goes like this. Soon and very